Showtime! The Capital G Show starts right now.
What's up YouTube, Capital G here. So YCS Austin wrapped up about 10 days ago, and I feel like I've had enough time to, analyze things and take a step back and draw some conclusions from what happened at that event. Also, we have another weekend of premier regional play, so, things are starting to flesh themselves out. With that being said, we're going to do the top 5 decks of the format, the Yu-Gi-Oh hierarchy. A lot of this information was again taken from YCS Austin, what we saw at that event, and then just what I expect to happen up until obviously the end of the month, where Hidden Arsenal 7 comes out and then things are kind of thrown into a loop. So let's get it done. Number 5, I've got windups. The deck is actually seeing a lot of competitive play right now. I do think it's seeing more competitive play than it is competitive success, which is a little disheartening. You only got one deck into top 32 at YCS Austin, although he did make it all the way to top 8, so that's definitely something positive you can build on. I believe that Factory and Rabbit are definitely the keys to the deck right now, because those are your tutors, those are the cards that let you go plus, and those open up all your plays. This deck does have some deficiencies though. You have a lack of beaters in a format, especially with heroes basically making their return, is flooded with them. Everything in Fire Fist, especially when you have the formation cards, those are beaters. Heroes, as I previously said, are just a deck full of beaters. I don't feel like windups have any great matchup. Last format, everyone was trying to answer windups, and right now I feel like, there's no one deck out there where you're just like, windups absolutely destroy that. So that's definitely something that is a problem for the deck, and I do feel like outside of Rabbit, the deck can lack, turn 1 plays. Obviously Factory is a great play. You obviously want to have windup Rabbit, but, outside of that, windup Shark, windup Magician, windup Rat, those aren't cards you can play turn 1 going first. So the turn 1 plays kind of remind me like of Insectors before they started playing Ladybug. It's like there's nothing really great there, especially since you lost all your loops. But I still do feel like windups are good. And one thing I like about the deck is I don't think that Ophion and I don't think the Verse is really going to present that much of a problem for the deck. Number 4, I've got Karakuri, which is a deck that seems to be flying so far under the radar, and it's easily the most unnoticed, underrated deck of the format right now. Karakuri just had back-to-back really impressive showings at the YCS level, but no one really even notices it, to be honest. It's the fastest deck in the format by a mile. It has insane OTK power, it has great draw power, and no, I'm not just talking about Barreto. I'm also talking about Karakuri Anatomy, which almost always lets you draw 2 cards during the turn you activate it. That's how fast the deck is. I feel like the deck has really good solid matchups against Mermail and Prophecy, because those decks don't play defense that well, especially against Mermails. They don't play Gores outside of ABYSSLEED. They really don't have any defensive options. A lot of times if you catch them with a Trap Stun or a Decree, you can just OTK that deck easily. The deck definitely does have some problems. It's one of those decks, much like Samurai, where it puts all of its hand on the board, and that's really the only way that you can play the deck. So if you get hit with mass removal like Mirror Force or Torrential, you're going to be absolutely crippled if you don't have a Solemn or you don't have a Trap Stun or Royal Decree. I've always liked the fact that this deck, despite the fact that it plays uber aggressive, it plays with a very reckless OTK nature. The Notorious Synchros just being in the deck really help against the rogue matchups. There's nothing like making a turn 1 Notoria Beast against a deck like Dark World. There's nothing like making a turn 1 Notoria Beast against a deck like Sith Samurai and knowing that, they're going to really struggle without all their spells. Decks like Prophecy or making a Barkion against a deck that is obviously going to have a lot of traps and stuff like that. So I feel like Karakuri should be up here because, at any given time, you can't be caught sleeping. Otherwise, it's game over. I had a player put 2 Berets, a Barreto, and a Stardust on me turn 1. I was just like, what the fuck? Number 3, I've got Heroes, which is just ridiculous to even say. Who would have predicted that going into this format? I thought the deck was dead. Clearly a hero lives. Mermail is ironically one of your best matchups because Absolute Zero has had a resurgence in competitive play equivalent to this deck. They really don't have any answers. If your opponent has already used their heavy infantry, they basically have 2 outs to it, like Catastrophe, which wastes their battle phase, their Diva, and their normal summon just to have their field Regeki, or they can make Big Eye, which costs them 2 monsters. And if you have a bottomless or an evac, I mean, basically it's GG. You know, the Abyss Dweller plays are relatively easy in this deck because of, you know, things like Bubble Man and Thrasher and stuff like that. And I mean, it's not like we forgot that Miracle Fusion is still a bitch to deal with. I mean, that card is just ridiculous. I think the Fire Fist matchup is one of those matchups where it's almost always in your favor because you have a plethora of 1900 beaters, and all their beaters are like 1700 with a fire formation card on the field, so they always have to use removal. And I mean, Gemini Spark just eats their lunch unless they have the Lance where they can lance your Neos Alias. If you just Gemini Spark them, I mean, that deck just absolutely falls apart. One of the biggest reasons why I'm so high on Heroes right now is because you've got 2 completely different builds with a wide variety of win conditions between them. I mean, it's very easy to go beatdown mode, just activating Miracle Fusions, dropping 3200 beaters on your opponent's head, or you can go Gustav Max, Chain Material, Fusion Gate mode, and just OTK your opponent. And it doesn't matter how many evacs, torrentials, bottomlesses they have, that shit's irrelevant because you can just loop an infinite amount of times and then it's GG. You know, I do feel like the blueprint has been written on this deck. I mean, if you look at some of the anti-meta beatdown versions of the deck, like, they play the exact same way that the deck played 2 years ago, and every single good player is going to be prepared for most of your moves the second that you summon a Stratos turn 1. So, you know, there aren't any surprises in this deck outside of like the Fusion Gate combos. And one of the biggest deficiencies with this deck is, you know, you have amazing Mermail and Fire Fist matchups. You struggle against the most mediocre random decks of the format. I will tell you what. I mean, Dark World, Chaos Dragons, I mean, those decks eat heroes alive, and they always have. So that's definitely something of a problem. But if you're playing at a high caliber event where you expect to be facing mainly the meta, Heroes is definitely good. Number 2, I've got Fire Fist, and they definitely earned this not only with their 2nd place finish at YCS Austin, but, you know, 5 decks in top 32, definitely commendable. And I mean, let's be real, they've just been tearing up the regional circuit. I like Fire Fist because they keep the game plan simple. You play the spell, you search a monster, you launch the spell, you search the spell, and then you just repeat that shit over and over again until all your opponent's cards are in the graveyard or whatever. You know, the deck definitely has a good amount of beaters, and I like the fact that the deck has so much innovation right now. There are so many great cards that you can splash into this deck. I mean, you can go Dino Fist, and that adds the element of being able to, you know, drop a Lagia and Doka so that you can answer some of those problems that the deck inherently can struggle with, like the negation of monster effects during your opponent's turn. You know, you can obviously play Tengu, which gives you floaters, monsters that you don't really care if your opponent, you know, dark holes you or whatever, because, you know, Tengu basically pays for himself. If you walk into a torrential, it's all good. So the variety for Fire Fist is definitely there, and I mean, we might just be scratching the surface of the innovation for this deck. You know, I've said in the past, I don't feel like there's any one deck that Fire Fist dominate, but outside of Dark World, I don't feel like they struggle against anything. So, you know, the deck is getting more support soon, so it's only going to thrive when it gets more cards. And, you know, the Verse matchup is definitely great because as soon as you get your Tenki on field, I mean, your opponent really can't do anything. Like, can you really commit an Ophidian to the field when I can just summon my bear and just blow it up, and, you know, your virus isn't going to stop that. And number 1 is MERMAIL, deservingly so in my book. Not only did the deck win YCS Austin, but it took about half of the top spots. The deck has also been doing extremely well on the regional circuit, and I feel like MERMAIL right now is the deck that you have to answer if you're playing a deck not named MERMAIL. I feel like it's the 2nd most aggressive deck in the format outside of Karakuri. I feel like the OTKs are just as consistent, and I actually think that your plays are a lot safer because, you know, generally when you're discarding cards to special summon your guys from the hand, you know, you're either searching things like spears and other cards like that, or you're triggering dragoons, which tutors basically your entire deck, or you're just blowing cards up on your opponent's side of the field. So, you know, the risk is not nearly as high as a deck like Karakuri, where if you fall into mass removal, you basically lose. You know, not only that, but MERMAIL it's one of those decks where, you know, yes, it doesn't play defense really well, but it just plays enough to get by, much like the New England Patriots. I mean, you can't just go willy-nilly throwing spell and trap destruction at your opponent because you don't know if that happens to be a MST or a roll to crease set, or if it's the inevitable Abyss Spear, and, you know, you end up triggering that, making your opponent get the land, and then searching a 2700 beater that you can't run over, and you just lose the game from there. You know, the deck has exceed plays for days, including stealing your opponent's monsters with Big Eye, or just locking your opponent down with the Yugioh. And You know, I feel like Royal Decree is it just makes the deck scary. I mean, now the deck is basically saying, hey, we can't play defense, but now you can't play defense either. But I feel like the deck is definitely the best deck of the format right now. Maybe things will change after Hidden Arsenal comes out. So let me know what you guys thought of the order. If I missed anything, let me know. If there are any decks that you think should have been in here, leave that in the comment section below. Click the like button as it helps me spread the word to people who may not have seen the video.